So, hi everyone. This is Tenneson, and I'm with my friends Kathy and Jerry, and the three of us keep coming together for these conversations that we call Shades of Life. And there's no particular theme that we bring into these, but maybe there is a background intention that we bring that says, could we come with some of the things that interest us, that we have some passion about, that we have some learning about, that we have some confusion about, or maybe just want to hang out together for a little while. And I think all of those are really, super important, valid, good criteria. So thanks for listening in. If you've been listening into our Shades of Life conversations, and we just try to continue to, as I think of it, invoke a little bit of meaning with one another and invoke a little bit of learning with one another, with a welcome of the range of things that can be like super big, broad stuff or super granular stuff. I enjoy those kind of friendships. So and I just made the comment with you, Kathy and Jerry, before we press record, that I would rather press record. I would rather watch the movie than talk about watching the movies or talking about what movie we're going to watch. So there's a little flavor in this for us of just start, just go, trust the follow it anywhere, trust the showing up of our hearts and our minds and our bellies in ways that might provide a little bit of fulfillment for us and maybe for some of the people that are listening also. So with that said, I think there's a bit of how we just check in with each other. And I want that space with each other also. It's just like, what's the hello that you want to say here? And are there particular things that feed that hello for you that we might give a little attention to today? How's that sound?
Yeah.
Cool beans?
Sounds good.
So hello, what's the hello?
Well, I can start with a few things that are present in my life at the moment. I'm to be very honest, in a challenged time in my life right now, business wise, because Jerry and I have a really big project that we're working on, which is exciting and comprehensive and taking us to whole new levels of thinking, and it is yet to produce any revenue. So it's taken a lot of time, and we'll know in the summer it will start to produce revenue, and that will be a relief. And in working with the challenge, I think there's a couple of threads. One is what is the healing work that I personally want to embark on, with the caveat of I've been a little disillusioned by healing work, magic work, all of this stuff over the years, asking what is the result that it's producing for me. So kind of that. And then having said that, just yesterday, courtesy of a good mutual friend and colleague of ours, did some healing work that was pretty transformative, at least in the moment. So we'll see what the long-term implications of that are. And then sort of, I think it's related, but it's a little hard to know. A couple of weekends ago, long weekend in Canada, one of my aunts died back in February. This is on my father's side of the family, or back in January. And this is on my father's side of the family. And she's one of the last two. She was one of the last two. Now there's only one aunt left. She's in her 90s. But the family planned a celebration of life on the long weekend in May so that people could go. And my brother and I did the pilgrimage to Quebec. And one of the interesting things about that, it's been a long time since Robert and I have both been in Quebec at the same time, but we went there every summer with our family on family vacations to this little town of Capshaw, which is on the St. Lawrence Seaway. So you've got the river, and you've got the beach, and you have a road, and on the other side of the road you have houses. And we were staying at some chalets very near where my grandparents' house was. House is still there. grandparents no longer there. And, walking on the sidewalk, it was like it was yesterday or something, not for me 6 or 7 years ago, for Robert a little bit longer ago than that. And it just really felt like it's so deep in our DNA, this experience from the past, that it kind of bubbled up and filled a lot of space. And also interesting for me, DNA wise, since I am not DNA related to this family, since I found out I was adopted in my mid-40s, my brother is, but there are some connections that just go beyond biology.
Hmm.
And histories and connection with ancestors and sort of all of that stuff. So these are things that are very present for me here today.
Okay, I love that. I'm going to pick up. Okay. So Kathy, you're just doing exactly what I love. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but just start talking and just start sharing and just start feeling. So I hear what you just spoke as like this good, just refreshing swath to me, or brushstroke of, some things that matter. And then I can connect into that brushstroke too. So it's less about the specific details, but boy, I think there's a super intimate connection in the principles or in the values or something that lives around it. So, I'll go in reverse order. And I think I'm trying to let myself follow. Ah, gosh, this is some of my current learning, but it's something about following the present moment, how to be in the present moment, just going with it. And my experience is knowing that there's always, well, I'm saying always, there's so often, there's always things to grab out of that seem to move the heart. And maybe that was one of the questions I was hearing as you started to talk about work, Kathy, and some of the project and the efforts you put into it. There's some question that lives behind that. Like, what do I want in my heart? When I look at my own work and when I look at the conversations that I have with people, some of them old, some of them new, what is it that I want in my heart? And even when I ask that question, I realize like that is a criteria that I want to matter, and I want it to be at the center, whether it's me and my heart or we as a group of people or a team or any of those things. Um, I think I carry some hurt in me around, maybe feeling like I can't show up with the heart, or I do show up with the heart and oops, it was a little rough. But in the end, I realize in the person that I am, I seem to can't not show up with the heart of it. And when I show up with my heart and invite others with their heart, my gosh, it gets interesting and it gets life-giving. So those are kind of soapboxy things for me, but I realize they're bigger patterns.
Mm.
What do I want in my heart? Uh, yeah, just I have some of my own layer of revisiting what work is right now and some of who I'm doing that with. And some of it is like, really wanting to create this kind of new thing. And I can feel the excitement in me and putting a lot of time and attention into it also. And then every now and then, this like doubty voice within me comes back and it says, what the hell are you doing? Do something, more real. It's such a judgy voice, right? Um, so there's just a little bit of that in me. I'm going to jump around a little bit too, because you referencing your aunt and the Victoria Day weekend there, being able to gather together. Um, I'm Canadian also, and I live in the United States now, but a lot of family system that lives up in Edmonton, Alberta. And one part of that family system is my Auntie Di, who is my mom's sister. And Auntie Di and Uncle Frank passed away a couple months ago at the start of this year in a really rough and fast passing. He was an 81-year-old man, I think, but he kind of went from this to gone in a very short period of time. Anyway, I had a dream last night about my Auntie Di, and I just dream in snippets. They're rarely big, big uh, triple header, big long arc movies. but I dream in snippets. And my Auntie Di was in that movie in that movie, in that dream last night. And I'm a person that tracks dreams. Like I try to scribble down a little note and I try to play with the meaning of them also. That is so not from any dream school. I'm just letting myself be associative. And when someone shows up in a dream like that for me in the tiniest of snippets, my Auntie Di yesterday, I tend to take that as a prompt. Like maybe it's time to check in on Auntie Di. And I haven't done that yet today, but I'll probably call sometime on the weekend and let her know that I was thinking about her. Um, I think I offer that here because it weaves into some of the magic theme or the subconscious theme that I want to follow and I want to give energy to in any of the work that I'm doing and any of the life that I'm living for that matter. There's something I think that I feel closer to now than I felt closer to before around giving myself or surrendering to some kind of flow that is happening, some kind of consciousness connection, some kind of knowing that is beyond brain or from a very different part of the brain and other parts of the body. I've been noticing that I've been saying with some of my colleagues in my calls lately that I really like the way this feels in my body.
Mm.
And even that kind of sentence, like I'm not saying something that I know, maybe I am saying it in a different way, but to for me as the person that I am to re-invoke the embodied knowing something like that, damn, that just feels good. And I don't feel like I'm super informed in all of that, but I tell my partner, my sweetheart Dana, the few times that we've danced, I've just said, look, I'm a real clunky dancer, but I have the heart of a dancer. And similarly with the magic here, I feel like, I'm not sure, I think I'm a little clunky with the magic, but boy, I have the heart to follow it. And it strikes me as relevant in, so many different ways. Um, what's deep in our DNA, Kathy, you naming that, I think there's a part of me that so readily translates an excitement of a question like that into some kind of form of group engagement or a circle or a cafe or some other form or many of the things that we share with one another. So let's see, what tucks all of that in for me in this little space with one another is um, something about just following what interests us. I so often feel that if we just follow what interests us, it somehow opens up pathway and some consciousness or some maybe even energetic that attracts others in. And it's less about the specifics, but more about that feeling. I have a bunch of that in me. And, as you two know, I think I've been trying to build this into work. And I think many of us have created both like pockets as well as big swaths of these things in the work that we get to do. And it feels fun to share that and exciting to share that with you too and whoever else is listening. Maybe that's a bit. I'll stop there. Pass that over to you, Jerry.
Wow. Oh, well, since we each are headed in our own directions, which is always lovely about this movie, 3 directors. Something that's been on, so there's 2 things I want to talk about. One is something that's been on my mind over the past couple of weeks, and something I knew I learned. So the first thing is attentive to small acts of kindness. And I shared 2 stories with Kathy a while back. So the first is the grocery store that I primarily go to that's near my house it's a family-owned company. So they have several grocery stores, but just here in the Twin Cities, and they're family-owned. And they're sort of a combination of very modern and very old school. And so you can go do the self checkouts and you can do all kinds of self serves at the salad bar. You can do that, And if you go through the checkout, there's somebody there to bag your groceries. And the vast majority of the time, it's somebody that's neurodiverse. And so they've made a real point of hiring people that are neurodiverse. And so the other day, and oftentimes I generally prefer to bag my own groceries. I bagged groceries in high school, and I'm better at it than anybody I've ever run
Me
into.
too. Me too. I want to bag groceries with you, Jerry Nagel.
Right. And I only need 2 bags instead of 5, but I was checking out, and the person that was supposed to bag my groceries got involved in a task, and very focused in it. And the woman that was checking out turned to the young man and said, "Well, what are you doing?" And, and as my groceries are sliding down, and he said, "I have to do this." And it was clear that that's what he had to do in the moment. And so instead of saying you have to stop, do anything else, she bagged my groceries, which wasn't her job to do in the moment. And we kind of jointly bagged them. But I thought that was just an act of kindness. And let's not discombobulate this person. Let's not cause some stress. Let's not do anything. I'll just work with the customer here. And that sat with me for a long time, just the kindness of it. So I actually did go back to the store a week later and told that story to a manager in front of the checker. She was there, and I told that story to the manager, and I just thought, it was just a tiny thing, a minute of kindness, but the situation could have been different. And then a few days later, I went to the local hardware store and bought some things, gardening things, including a clipper, a pruner, and wheeled it out to my car in the cart and loaded everything in my car and missed the pruner. Left it in my cart. Got home. Oh my gosh, it's gone. Went back to the store, and someone had seen it in the cart and turned it in to a return counter. Now, they could have pocketed it. I mean, it would have been a freebie, nice freebie, but they turned it back in, and it was there when I went back. And so here's this other little sort of act of kindness that really resonated with me. And so I've just been thinking about those things. And then I live in a kind of a circular street. So you see a lot of the people walking by a lot or driving by a lot. And I would say 50, 60% or more immigrants in my little neighborhood. And since I've moved in, I've made it a habit to wave at everybody that drives by. If I'm outside, even if I'm mowing the lawn, I'll turn and wave. And I've made it a habit of saying hi to anybody that walks by. And just this summer, I really began to notice that a lot of the people that are kind of coming by or walking by are now waving first or saying hi first. There's a woman that walks by every day and she's clearly the grandmother, and she clearly doesn't speak English, but she's picking up her 2 grandkids at the bus stop down the street, half a block. And now she says hi in her own sort of nodding way. And another grandmother that's down a couple doors down was outside and said hi to me first the other day. And I'm just finding that just so heartwarming, that all this sort of waving. And there were a few folks that I would wave and they would never wave back ever. And now one of the neighbors across the street always waves back. It took 2 years of waving every time I saw him before I finally. And so I'm just, it's the small connections that bring a moment of joy when somebody waves at you as they drive by, because you waved every time you saw them, or whatever. It says hi because I always said hi, or whatever. And that doesn't make me any particularly unique. It's just that I'm in a neighborhood where waving or saying hi, I think, matters, in an urban area that we can do that. So that's one thing I wanted to share. And we can talk about some of that one. The other thing was a question that emerged for me, Tennyson, for you, was I had a lovely coffee meeting last week with a woman who has been working for a group called Faith and Prejudice.
Mm.
And so her professional work is with faith communities.
Mm.
And we had a wonderful conversation. But one of the things that one part of her work outside of Faith and Prejudice is just working with pastors that are in pastor stuff, you know. And she remarked about how challenging it's become for pastors because we started talking about a little bit about polarization, and she was wondering about worldview intelligence and polarization. And we talked about it, and she's talked about how so many pastors are trying to deal with some of that in their churches, where there's these emergent, strong, differing views. And one of the results is that people now church shop. And I had never thought of that. So she said churches have become a marketplace. And so you don't spend your entire family life at a single church anymore. You shop. And I had never thought of it that way before. That, I grew up where you went to the same church your whole life, period. That was it. You were identified with the church that you went to. For me, it was McCabe Methodist in Bismarck. Everybody went to confirmation class there. We did all of all of my brothers and sisters and all of us and my parents, our entire family church life was around McCabe Methodist from birth on. But now it's a marketplace. Churches are a marketplace. And I'm fascinated by that as a concept that I hadn't had before. And was curious about your experience in that realm. And that wanders us away. Kathy sort of next on the list in a bit, but as we circle around here. So I'm complete. Things are back.
I love the buffet here. Do you want to go, Kathy, or flip?
Flip.
Okay, flip, receive. I'll play into a little bit of that, maybe in some reverse order. Because I was on a call with a pastor yesterday that was in an introduction from a friend who said, you two should talk to each other. And yesterday was Zoom coffee, okay, to do that. And that call, mostly hello, like, oh my gosh, who are you? And what's it like? And for this person, it was being a pastor. And, I like to be super conversational about things like that. We're just humans exchanging little bits of story. And anyway, that one ended with let's do some coaching sessions, and we've arranged for that. It was a delightful call, period. But I was seeing some of the things that you're naming, Jerry. Like, pastors wear so many hats these days. My personal experience is with this person happened to be a UU person, but a lot of the oh shoot, I just lost it. United Church of Christ. UCC, there we are. Pastors and younger pastors too. And I just see so often they are working in a lot of isolation, even though there's associations and structural setups and things like that. And of course, annual meetings and conferences and stuff like that. I think pastors so often in the midst of trying to be teachers, spiritual directors, managers, counselors, educators, and probably 3 or 4 other things to add on to that. It's a lot. And philosophers, they're in the midst of responding to what's happening in so much external society. I just have a lot of heart in there for the pastors that I've been able to work with and how they tend to go. And recognizing, if I bridge that, recognizing that there's a quality of, this is such a personal life theme. There's a quality of aloneness that I think is widely spread, or loneliness. And, sometimes it's people who are in more literal isolation. And sometimes I think it's just we're working in big, large, complex systems of people, but it's short of some of the more real connection. So folks like us come along and try to create some of that real connection and some of that learning that comes from that. So I think that's one of the bridges that I would make. I feel myself responsive to like people who sometimes just need a little company, or sometimes need another, like a little company. And oh, by the way, maybe just this one question, could we think about it for a little bit? And maybe even sometimes like, I need to talk to somebody who doesn't come from my church, or doesn't come from my school, or doesn't come from my organization. So we get to do some things like that. But I'm going to pull it back to Jerry, to your stories. I love the way that you tell stories. And so I feel enveloped in some Jerry stories that, reminds me of some version of my growing up, and my waves in the neighborhood, and finger nods on the steering wheel as you pass somebody on a back road, all of those things. I love those things. Attentive but small acts of kindness. I think that appeals to me in the stories that you just shared, Jerry. But it appeals to me because I feel like, good golly, the world is complicated. And I often wish I had a bigger brain, or whatever it takes to understand and act within that in a different way. So often I just need something simple. And when I come back to, well, I don't know about all of that, but here's one thing I can do. I often land on things like, well, just try kindness right now. A simple act of kindness here with the neighbor, hold the door open, let them in on the lane, on the road, whatever, smile, all those kind of things. And there is a part of me that's just being nice. Yeah. And then I'll let myself get super serious with it. The kind of energetic pattern that I want to create in the world is rooted in things like, what about simple acts of kindness, or simple acts of attentiveness? And that includes with self also. Like, can we be kind to ourselves? Can we be kind with each other? Can we be kind in the circumstances? So I dig that kind of stuff, Jerry. I find random acts of kindness, or random acts of attentiveness, or those kind of things. To me, that's good organizing patterns that I find I want to live amongst and contribute to. And yeah, just to pull it one more step there, I think when we have baselines like that, we can do profoundly complex stuff together. And yet something in that baseline matters. So, thanks for bringing those in. That's my stirrings. Hey, Kathy.
Well, I'm going to say I don't know that much about the faith community these days. I have a number of pastors who are in my social feeds and all, and those who are there, I have a high degree of respect for. This notion of church shopping, or whatever that term was, I'm not actually sure that's a bad thing, given like how some faiths are just not really good for some people. They're not that nourishing. So if I can shop around to find a place that nourishes my spirit or aligns with my worldview, or whatever the case, I don't know that that's such a bad thing. As just one random thought that came into my mind. I think if I pick up on this notion of isolation, I don't think it's just pastors who are feeling isolated. I think that there are many of us who feel that in one capacity or another. And I think it's a really good question of how we build and maintain connections and networks that help us feel less isolated and help us feel less, less alone, and provide us with spaces where we can be inspired and nourished. I think that that's all good. And then I think I go back to something you said first time around, Tenneson, about the carrying some hurt in your heart. Sometimes about what happens sometimes when we show up in fully authentic us ways. And the big question that I'm in at the moment, which is sparking some of the healing stuff, is this question of visibility. and how visible do I allow myself to be? And how does that relate to the work that I do, that we do? And what prevents me from being more visible? And I think I'm getting some answers to that right now, which is kind of cool. But one of the things that I'm aware of, as you both know, I have a memoir called Embracing the Stranger in Me, A Journey to Open-Heartedness. When people ask me about that book, I describe it as the finding out I was adopted story, my mother's journey with dementia, job loss, divorce, my mother's ultimately her journey with death, and some of my father's health challenges. What I don't say, intentionally or unintentionally, is that it's a book about a spiritual journey. Like, it starts there and it ends there, and all of the threads pulled through there are really all about this spiritual journey that that I was on in that period of time that I write about, and I haven't abandoned it. I'm still like really on it. So I find myself with this curiosity of why? Like, why didn't I lead with that instead of go, oops, I kind of forgot that part of the many threads that are in the book, even though that is the essence of the book. And I think that has something to do with this visibility question and this, question about, well, what does that have to do with my chosen career, my chosen profession, with being a facilitator in all kinds of different environments? And is that somehow going to be an inhibitor in that? So I think sometime in the next day or so, I'm going to post about my memoir being a book of spiritual journey that has these like components of it. And maybe you'll be interested to buy my book. Who knows? So yeah, so those are just a couple of things that popped up.
I'm ringing a bell.
I gathered.
Mm. Can you ring us back in?
Oh, and then ringing us back. Didn't go quite that far, but thank you.
It's all right. Well, we're certainly on a wandering, start somewhere, go anywhere
That's all.
thing today. This I'm wondering, in these challenging times that we're in, what can ground us into connection? Is it the wave as the car drives by? Is it the saying hello when you walk by or somebody walks by? Is it, because the flip of that was I was out for a walk the other day and either walk or bike, and in the path that I was on, I was path, and a ways in front of me was a young woman. I'm gonna say, she's 13, 14, something or other. I'm young. She was far enough ahead of me that I would never catch up with her in my walk. But she turned around and saw me and started to run.
Yeah.
And then went up and off the path in a way. And I thought, golly, first off, I'm not a threat to anybody. And secondly, I'm not even close enough, but there was something there. And it made me a little bit sad, and then it made me also realize, whatever stories people are told. But it's the, if she'd been coming the other direction. So when I go up, Kathy walks with me. When she's here, we go up and we walk around the lake. And every person that walks by me, I try to say hi to. If we're in different directions, I always say hi, unless they clearly don't want to say hi. Their heads turned away, they're ignoring you know, it doesn't matter. Always say hi. And it's fascinating, the little, how those interactions go. Once in a while, somebody will stop for a minute and chat for a word or two or whatever. And sometimes you just kind of keep going and you can see other people doing the same kind of thing. Some will stop and chat, some won't. And that seems to me a simple human groundedness. It seems to me a statement of relationship, if you will. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, other than in all of the turmoil that exists, the one thing that could keep us steady is being in some form of human connectedness. Just saying hi. Just celebrating the day. The other way he told us to Kathy, it cracked me up. I'm going one direction. There's an older guy with a walker coming the other direction. And we get near each other and he stops and he looks at me and he goes, "This is such a gorgeous day. This reminds me of my favorite song." I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. She was a wallflower at the dance and a dandelion in the grass. Oh, that's interesting. And then we just kept going. But it was just like a moment there where he so wanted to just share this little thing with somebody somewhere, that it's just, I kind of chuckled and kept going, enjoying my walk. But it steadies a person, I think, just to touch in a little bit in some small way. And I just to feel like somebody ran away from that saddened me a bit. But I get it too. I get, there's not another soul around in the park path at that spot, and but yeah, that's it. I'm just some steadiness in life. Peace back.
Okay, I'll pick up. I'm going to try to string a few things together because I want to feel it, right? So one is Jerry, and what you just described. I, as you two know, in some way, I just kind of live a life that hears questions. So it might be a statement, and then it shows up in my brain, translated as a question. What keeps us steady? What keeps me steady? And if the three of us were to do nothing more than focus on that question for a week, I bet a lot of good things would come out of that in the lightest way, simple acts of kindness, simple acts of attention. So I hear that question and it sort of excites me a bit. I know that experience too, Jerry, that you just shared, the reality of what it's like to be a man, what it's like to be a person, a human, safety, concerns, all of that. There's been so many times where I've been walking and just had my spidey senses say, oops, I need to drop back a little more from that person in front of me, or stop and look at my phone and turn away, or those kind of things, that are also acts of kindness. I'm not taking any of that personally. I'm just trying to offer an act of kindness that maybe in that moment, the kindness is the space, the non-threatening, growing a bit more space, something like that. The reference, Jerry, that you made of the start anywhere, follow it somewhere, follow it everywhere. I love playing with things like that too. Land somewhere goes on to that for me. Try something lands on that for me. Celebrate some things lands on me. Like these are all codes for living, or codes for aliveness maybe, or life-giving qualities in the version that I'm trying to live. And then Kathy, I'm dwelling back into some of what you were saying around visibility. What a huge dynamic emotional field to pay attention to. And what a deliciously vulnerable space to be aware of. And I have lived some chunks of times where that vulnerability was not delicious. It was fucking hard. So all of that's there, but I love the question again of like, what is my bill? I'm taking it and using the question now, right? So it's transposing. It's like, what's the visibility that I allow or that I yearn for?
Mm.
Some of that kind of stuff. And then I was thinking of the way that we grow in our own stories. Some of it, I think, by deliberate choice, some of it by dumb luck, and some of it by having some good folks along the way that show up on the path. Because I'm thinking a little bit of Meg, as you two know, Meg Whately's been a good friend and colleague and boss initially in my life. And I remember back in this is a 30-year friendship now that used to be me working part-time with her and now usually means let's have tea on the deck kind of stuff. And, Meg's early work, she got to be out there pretty good. Her early work was really framed around leadership. So, why am I not calling it a spiritual journey? All of that thing was a spiritual journey. Well, Meg started with that leadership framing. And for those who follow her now, her work is around warriors for the human spirit. And in the 30 years that I've known her, I got to see her shift from that leadership, so centrally focused leadership narrative into, oh my gosh, this is a human heart thing. This is a human spirit thing, And it was fun to see that. And I think I say that here because Meg's someone that I have a lot of respect for and revere in some ways, both for friendship and for who she's been in the world. And I like to think that most of us are evolving our stories. Maybe the seed is in us right from the beginning, but we learn how to be with that seed or grow it or transplant the gardens, all of that kind of stuff with some time. There are so many parallels that I relate to, Kathy, also. When I'm invited to do some leadership work, I'm glad to do some leadership work. But when I'm describing it with people or we're having those initial meetings and everything, I have to say, like, okay, leadership, that's cool on the one hand, but on the other hand, we might be doing some of this too. Maybe we're trying to strengthen the fabric of our community here a little bit, or the fabric of our curiosity a little bit together. I have to say those kind of things. So, how any of us evolve with those seeds planted within us to begin to call them what we really want to call them. Damn, that's a journey I relate to. I'll pause.
Yeah, I come back to a bit or to the description that you offered a bit ago, Tenneson, about pastors and our perceived role of them. And one of the things that Kathy and I have talked a lot about in some of our art of hosting work, and we've had a number, and you have too, Tenneson, a number of pastors participate in it, is that one of the other roles that has emerged for pastors is as someone to turn to when there are challenges in the community. So, they're pastors, school counselors, even principals and so on are pretty good at one-on-one, or pretty good at couples and those kinds of things, but they're really not trained to be a leader in resolving community-wide problems. And yet, and to me, the reality is one of the challenges in society, and part of what was the origin behind metal art, is no one was really trained to do that in our communities. But we turned to the people that we thought would: pastors, school counselors, school principals, etc. And so one of the powerful elements of art of hosting has been the notion that we could bring community conversation capacity into a community, and whomever wanted to pick it up and run with it could do it. That this was not a positional kind of skill. This was a heart skill in a way and a conversational skill in a way. But it's where we've seen extensive art, like the work Kathy and I did in Grand Rapids, where we've seen extensive people, several hundred people in a small community train, conversations change. Responsibilities for how they happen change. And perhaps even sort of random acts of kindness emerge more and more because we're in a different kind of conversation with each other. And I think we've lost sight of, I'm rambling again, of the role of conversation in building community. And to me, that's one of the powers of art of hosting, but it could be any number of other things that people are out there working on the power of conversation to build community. But the critical thing here is it's not a positional responsibility. It's not a title responsibility. It's any of us can step up and do this. Build bridges, build connection, approach issues in our community differently. Work with differences of opinions and yet try to find some form of understanding and awareness, all of that kind of stuff. And we need that now more than ever. I feel, I wish when I look back at some of the stuff we did here in Minnesota and North Dakota and South Dakota with art of hosting, and Kathy's a part of that, we were doing 4 or 5 of them a year in this region. And now they hardly happen at all. And there should be 4 or 5 a year in regions throughout the entire country. I think we could be in a different state of mind if we had more of that kind of, let's just build community through conversation. And there are groups trying to do that, but so many of them I find, I don't want to name them, but they're centered on blue and red, political this, political that. As let's move away from that and just be centered on our humanness. Peace back.
So I want to pick that up and link it back to something that I said right at the very beginning, and then I'm feeling like we're probably close to the end of our conversation here for today. But
and we'll start another 8 hours together, which would be fun.
Jerry, when you're talking about the role of conversation in building community, yes, and that took me right back to where I started around healing journeys, because we know that when we convene those spaces for art of hosting or participatory leadership or whatever we choose to call it, many people find healing in those spaces, and they didn't even know they were looking for healing in those spaces. And we are a world deep in hurt for a whole bunch of different reasons. Some playing out on a very global grand scheme, and some playing out for each of us individually wherever we are. And so when I think about the role of conversation in building community, I think about what is the role of conversation in healing as well. And when we talk about listening in the work that we do, sometimes one of the phrases that I use to describe that is, when you listen well enough, you listen another person into being. And I've had that experience personally where someone was listening to a story that she invited, and I felt like she was listening me into healing in that moment. And so probably every single one of us has some aspect of ourselves that is in need of healing, whatever that looks like. And that I go back to what we do for ourselves, we do for others. What we do in this moment, when we heal something in this moment, we heal back and forth along our lineages. And so it reminds me personally, there's even greater value in the healing work that I do both reluctantly and embrace the stuff I embrace, that it goes beyond me. It impacts my family, it impacts lineages, it probably impacts community, and it impacts my ability to do the work that we do.
You named it, Kathy. I think we are at a point of checking out of this call. But before that little round, anything else that needs to be spoken? Jerry, did you have anything more you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay. That whole thread that you just spoke, Kathy, it's compelling to me. We've shared some of those versions, as we re-narrate with groups what we're doing, and try to honestly point them into a direction that maybe has a little more room in it, or something deeply compelling in it. And the healing journeys is part of that for me, or health is part of that for me. If I'm speaking to just what feels like it's arisen from our time together, even that feels narrow to say it that way. From this connection, that happens to be occurring this moment over Zoom now, today, on this Friday, last day of May. I like the feeling of getting to explore. And that's part of what starts me off with, like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. Let's just start. The ability and the invitation even to just connect what has energy. Ooh, that feels yummy. Feels life-giving. I think it feeds some of that narrative underneath for me of yeah, we have a bunch of things that we need to do, but what if we are just trying to create conditions that give us a little more life-giving experiences together? Every part of me longs for that, or drifts toward that, or chooses to go head in on that. So I love the way that we each reframe together. I love the way that we sort of play with it joyfully. And I do like the wander. I think there's such a thing as some just good skilled wander together that is a long lost art and could be reclaimed a little bit. We're all in offering things. You folks I know have some Art of Hostings coming up, Worldview Intelligence stuff coming up. I'm returning into the world of a little circle intensive and practicum that's coming up. So peek away at websites to find all of that stuff. And yeah, wanting to plug that in here also. But mostly I think I'm saying thanks to you as the friendship that we have here in this little format that we keep playing with. There's a lot of joy in it to me that comes with our simple acts of kindness and attentiveness and consciousness. There's something really awesome in this little simple thing here. Thanks for today.
Just one sort of quick little reflection, instead of the whole darn story, is just like there's simple little acts of kindness, I think that there's simple little acts of healing. It doesn't need to be big. It can be just a simple little thing. And there it is. I'm complete.
Well, I think my final word for this conversation has to do with healing, but also with the heart. And yesterday I did this session with a colleague, and she asked me to sense into where I was feeling constricted, and definitely in the heart. And then by the end of the session, the heart had expanded and felt lighter. And I think that anytime we're engaged in conversations, connections, relationships that allow that for us, or invite that for us, or generate it, we're in beautiful moments to be honored.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thanks, peeps. Thanks, everyone listening and for sharing. Appreciate it. See you next time.
Bye for now.